Okay, so we're recording honors biology, chemistry of life, themes of biology, right? So let's go over one question at a time, and let's see if which ones you. Oh, so hold on, something's wrong. Okay, so 3:41. We're gonna try to do this in 15 minutes. All right. 15. I think we can. I did the test in 5, so we should be able to do it in 15, right? Together. All right. Which of the following is not a characteristic of life? Do you all remember what the characteristics of life were?
Yes.
Okay, so complex chemical. Now the word here, the key word here is. This thing's not. Now this thing wants to act up. Do you see how these things happen? They give it 10 seconds. It's like, oh, why can't we all work together? Yeah. See? All right, let's do this right. So, the key word here is not, right? And has, so the question is, what about this? What about complex chemical organization? Yes, life, remember we said, life. I think I said that life is a system, right? So we're talking about many parts working together. And I think we used a car as an example. And then we said, the other thing we said was that life is, when you talk about metabolism, for instance, it's a bunch of chemical reactions. I think I said that clearly. And that's okay, we miss things sometimes, but hopefully it's not so much that we don't get a bad grade, we get a bad grade. So this is a characteristic of life, so we don't have to worry about that. Reproduction, making more of ourselves, that definitely is. So maybe this one was a question mark in your mind, but now we know it is. Adaptation to environmental changes. Yeah, that happens, right? Things adapt to how things environment change. So the right answer here is C. And the key here, and why is it C? Let's be clear. This is probably why most people got it wrong, is most people didn't know what the word differentiation meant, because a couple people came and asked. If you don't know what the word means, it doesn't hurt to come and ask. I wouldn't tell you what reproduction means, because I know you should know it. But differentiation, if you didn't understand, I would have told you. So look, it just means you have one cell turning into many other different kinds of cells in a body. Yeah, because they may not have known what this word meant, and it's not really part of the test. I don't tell you answers that are part of the test. So differentiation means one thing. Differentiation means one thing turning into many different kinds of things. Different. The core word is different. So, for instance, you were one cell. Remember me telling you were one cell? Yeah. And you turn into many different kinds of cells. You have eye cells now, heart cells, muscle cells, ear cells, nose cells, tongue cells, right, etc. So that works for us. But that's not a characteristic of life. It is a characteristic of multicellular organisms, right? Because anything that's more than one cell probably has different kinds of cells in it. Why is it not a characteristic of life? What about our little friends? What about our little friends that we know of as bacteria? One bacteria turns into what? 2 bacteria. They're only one cell. They never differentiate. They never turn into lungs and hearts and eyes because they're only one single cell. Do you see what I'm saying? So the whole prokaryote, all the prokaryotes, all the single cells, organisms, there is no multicellular, there's no differentiation. So even though this is true, it's not a characteristic of all life. Remember I gave you that clue during the test? It's all the characteristics of life must apply to all life, right? Okay, metabolism. That goes with number 2, the second bullet point, doesn't it? So metabolism, the answer is the sum of all chemical reactions.
You know what I thought it was?
What?
I picked C.
You picked C?
You remember you told me when I asked you about the CarMax, you said something about energy. So that's why.
That's right. It is something about energy, and the idea that metabolism, but it's not the way an organism uses. It's not the way it uses the energy. It's the total amount of chemical reactions and energy that goes in and energy that goes out. But it's not how it uses. See the way it uses the organism. See how tricky that is? So you're right that it has something to do with energy. You're right, but the best answer is the sum of all the chemical reactions. Right? So it's the chemical reactions that add things to you. It's the chemical reactions that subtract things to you. So it's the anabolic. Remember that from the video, from the presentation versus the catabolic. And I told you didn't have to know anabolic and catabolic, right? I said the only thing you have to know, and you go back and look at the video, but all I said was, if you all you have to know is that metabolism is the sum of all the different chemical reactions that are going on in your body. That's metabolism. And the rest of these, they're all true. They're, the rate at which you eat food is related to metabolism because that's the in, right? That's the stuff that's adding. But that's only the anabolic stuff, right? That's only the digestion. You're not dealing with the output, right? So it's input and output. Does that make sense? I hope it does. All right. All right, so the next one, in the class we discussed the thermometer idea. Do you remember that discussion? You guys remember it? Yeah. About like if your temperature goes up, you start to sweat, and that cools you down. If you get too cold, you start to shiver, and it brings you back up, right? And that's why I put this one in here, because it's going to see if you were paying attention. Okay? Shivering's wrong, because shivering only warms you up, doesn't cool you down, right? And the whole point here, and if you read it, I actually gave you the answer in there already. It's when you have a set point, and the set point could be for temperature. For you, it's 98.5, something like that, degrees Fahrenheit. For some people, it might be 99. For other people, 97, whatever. But it's somewhere around, you have a set point. Your body has a set point. If you get too hot, your body cools off. If you get too cold, your body warms up. And you kind of go around here, right? Something like that. And so what we call this set point, we call this whole thing is homeostasis. What happens to you if you stop? If you stop, what happens if you're out in the cold in a winter day and you can't get warm enough? You get cold and you just keep getting cold, then you don't get warmer. You die. And that's why the answer is C, death. All right.
I was going to pick that, but I'm like, I don't know if that was going to make sense.
It does. Be dormant means you're not actively doing anything. Like a seed, you know seeds? Those organisms are dormant. They can stay dormant for 100 years. And then the right conditions happen and they start doing processes again. So dormant means they're not doing much. Hibernating, similar to that. They slow their metabolism. The metabolism, all their chemical reactions, get slowed down. Dormant means they're not doing much at all. Okay? But you didn't really need to know that, right? Because those were all just words that I threw in there. That's what happens on tests. When you're on, why do I make these tests this way? Because that's the way your end of course exams are going to be. You got to get ready for the end of course exam and your ACTs. So which of the following is not among the basic characteristics shared by living things? So you know your basic characteristics, don't you? There's 7 of them. Is using and growing energy one of them? Yes, using energy, yeah. Growing? Yeah. Sure is. Responding to the environment and your surroundings? Yes, it is. So what's the only possible answer? Breathing. And you might say, wait a minute, we breathe, we're alive, right? Yeah, but it doesn't apply to all organisms, right? Bacteria don't breathe, they don't have lungs. Trees exchange gases, but they don't really breathe. They don't take in oxygen, put out carbon dioxide with lungs, right? So, all right. All right. Through evolutionary processes, organisms can do what? Can they eliminate their cell structures? No, because then they wouldn't be alive, because one of the characteristics of life is they have cells. So no. Can they stop the need to reproduce? No. They have to be able to make babies, otherwise life stops, right? Can they adapt to their environment? Yes, that's the answer. And of course, all living things need energy. You need energy. Energy is movement. So let's move on then. So when we're looking at this one, which of the following characteristics of a glass of water mean that it cannot be considered alive according to our shared characteristics of living things? It has no arms or legs. Well, that's true. A glass of water doesn't have arms or legs, but does that make it not part of the characteristics of life? No, because a worm doesn't have arms or legs, right? And a worm is alive, according to our definition. So one of these has something to do with water that makes it not alive. So it's not this one. The fact that it has no heart, does that make it not? No, it doesn't, because someone closed the door. A tree is alive, but it doesn't have a heart. So that's not it. It has no tissues. Well, that could be, but that's not a characteristic of life. Having tissues is part of the hierarchy of life, which is, I think, where a lot of kids got it confused, right? So in multicellular organisms, we have tissues, but a bacteria doesn't have tissues. Is a bacteria alive? Yes, because it has all 7.
So it's cells.
It's cells. And remember, that's number 1. Wasn't that number 1? That number 1 is that all living things have cells. So that's the answer there. Which of the following include organisms all of only one species? So one of these here, only, let me change this because I changed it to that one because I thought it was funny. But so all 4 of these, they include organisms all of only one species. One of these only has one species.
I guess A.
You put kingdom?
I guess A.
All right, so kingdom, let's talk about a kingdom. Let's talk about mammals. You've heard of mammals?
Oh, I think you're talking about kingdom like with Prince and Prince.
Oh, okay, all right. Oh,
You
sorry.
know about that?
No, I was talking about, oh, sorry. I'm talking about kingdom like mammals or reptiles. Like mammals, there are different species in mammals, right? There's tigers and there's humans. So there's different species. So it's not kingdom. So I'm glad you said that. I thought somebody would know that. I was wondering if somebody would choose kingdom. Ecosystem, well, I'm sure you're not the only one. Ecosystems and communities, that includes a lot of stuff. Ecosystems is the biggest one, right? Out of these, ecosystems is the biggest. A community is a bunch of different species working together, so that's not it. Ecosystems has many species and the earth and all kinds of abiotic and biotic things in there. What's the only one out of here that only has one species? Population.
Population is like us. Right, race. It's a lot of different race. That's all I think.
Like a race? Okay, so the population of Cleveland is 100,000. How many species are there in that population? One. Human. The population of dogs is 1 million. How many species of dogs are there?
I was
One.
rushing through it.
So see, it's I guess when I'm hearing, this was a double whammy because this one was testing your understanding of species and your understanding of, yeah, I would, and you know what, like I told you, it's hard to switch to high school, right, from middle school, because in middle school, that's the kind of question some people might give you, right? Because it's just kind of like, but I wouldn't do that to you in high school unless I told you it was a joke. Which of the following groups is the largest of the and most diverse out of these? Population is not the largest. It's actually the smallest here. Ecosystem is the largest. Out of this group, population is the smallest. Let's rank them from smallest to biggest. In populations, what you have is let's just use humans. There's these 3 guys living in a forest, okay? And their population, their women, their wives die, maybe they have a couple babies, right? All right, so that's it. That's the population in the forest. But in a forest, you also have what? Right, trees. And you have grass all over the place, right? Maybe you have some flowers. And, okay, there's a monkey somewhere up here. I can't draw a monkey, so I'll just do a squiggle. There's birds, right? So that's a popular, there's more stuff, maybe some rabbits, whatever. Looks like a devil rabbit, but whatever. Some rabbits running around, right? Okay, let's make it a carrot then, whatever. So there's a bunch of species of things here, right? A bunch of stuff. This is the population. Let's be clear on that. This is the population of humans right here. You see it?
So when you consider population, like, you won't consider, like, because when I thought population, I thought you mean like the environment population and then with the animals and stuff, not with the humans.
It could be animals. It could be all the rabbits. Maybe there's 50 rabbits in the forest. All the rabbits are another population. Okay. So population is just one species. One species.
Okay.
But in a forest, there's more than one species, right? And they interact. So the population is just one species, so that's actually the smallest. I'm going to go 1, the smallest. The next, that's not the smallest, is it? Well, I guess it is. Yeah, that's true. Population is just this population of humans right here in the forest. Now, why not species? Why is species the second?
Because species can, it's a lot of them, but can they like also extinct?
Right, so a species is humans in a forest, but there's also humans way over here in the city, aren't there? Mm-hmm. Right? And because there's humans in a city, I don't even know what I'm drawing anymore, but little windows, whatever. There's humans over here in the city far away. The humans in here are part of the species, aren't they? But the population is just one piece of it. So there's a population that live in Cleveland. Then there's a population of Ohio, right? Our human species is all over the planet. But our population in Cleveland is here, right? So population is species is bigger. Community is even bigger because a community, now this is actually, species might actually, the more I think about it, the more I question that. But okay, so we'll go with that. A community includes all the grasses, all the birds, right? Do you see that? So the community is all these different species working together. So that's a community. Okay? And then the biggest is number 4, is an ecosystem. So a community is this ecosystem. The ecosystem could be everything from the city or for everything in the forest, the whole forest, not just this area here, but maybe the forest goes out for 50 or 100 miles. That whole thing is an ecosystem that includes the earth and the rocks and the water and everything else. So it's much more diverse, and the biggest unit is ecosystem. This here, you see this here? This is that hierarchy of life that you had to remember the order. Remember I told you, remember the smallest to biggest? Remember it went atom, molecule, cell, right? From cell we went to tissues. From tissues we went to organ, then organ system, then organism, then population, then community, then ecosystem, then biosphere. Right, so that's where this is. So ecosystem was actually the biggest according to that hierarchy. That's where that question came from. All right, banana is very different from a human, yet we are related. Which of these explains that relationship between kinship and diversity? Which is it, do you know?
The evolution of life.
Evolution of life is the right answer, yeah. So I'm gonna email this to you in a YouTube video, so you don't have to like record it or take pictures. So you can, but it's kind of wasting space. So evolution of life. The evolution of life is this idea. That's what explains how you can be related to a banana, and yet both you and the bananas are different. So the hierarchy of life is what we just talked about. That really doesn't have to do with this. The characteristics of life, you know what those are, right? And last, living organisms interact with their environment. That's one of the characteristics of life, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the only possible answer there is D. 10, a theory is, and a lot of people have different ideas of what a theory is. A lot of people pick that. C is actually a hypothesis.
I thought the theory and hypothesis like the same thing.
No, they're not. See, a hypothesis is a guess. a guess.
So a theory.
I think that that the peregrine falcons killed off all the pigeons in Cleveland.
That's a theory.
That's what I think. That's my hypothesis.
But not so
A theory is a well-tested explanation. We will go over it again before the next test. And also, please pay attention when Ms. Bandicourt goes over with you, right? Because obviously we need to work on this, right? So when you're going over it, either in my class or Ms. Bandicourt's class, you'll be asking, okay, let's make sure we understand what a theory is. Let's make sure, because that's going to be on the next testing it. And I'll be testing that the rest of the year, so you'll be hearing a lot of it. Yeah.
I thought a hypothesis was an if-then statement. I didn't hear you say if or then.
But this says a hunch or a guess, a personal opinion that a scientist tests. So something you're testing is a hypothesis. You're right. We write a hypothesis in an if-then statement. You're right. So that's good that you know that. But we're writing it as an if-then statement, but that's not what I'm saying here. I didn't write this as an if-then statement because this is not a hypothesis. This is defining or describing a hypothesis, right? So you're right. If I would have put, what is a statement that is an if-then, that's written in an if-then statement? What is a sentence written in an if-then statement? Then you would have known, right? Bless you. You would have known it was a hypothesis. That's good. But a hypothesis is also a scientific guess. It's a guess. A theory is something that we tested and we're pretty sure it's right. Does that make sense? Okay. It's an explanation.
Can I do 11?
Yeah. Number 11. What is it?
C.
Is definitely C. Most people got this one right because it's kind of one of the easier ones. So you know the atomic mass is 56. You know atomic mass equals protons plus neutrons. You know that atomic mass is 56. You know protons is 26. What's the neutron number? That's 56 minus 26 equals neutron number, right? Which equals 30. Are we good with that? That's how you did it? Because that's how you got to do it. Now remember, that's what this is because I gave you this one and this one. What if on the actual test I gave you this one and either one of those? Can you find the third one? Yeah, so I think that's pretty easy.
It's
Yeah.
26 and 26, not 56. 56 minus 26. It's 26 minus 26 to get 30. You wrote 56 and 26 twice.
Oh, no, yeah. The reason I did it twice is because I subtracted 26 from both sides. So let me do it here. Let me do it differently. And then that's rewritten. See that 56 minus 26. All right. Very good. All right. Let's move on. Thank you for checking me on that. All right. So water's a special molecule. I told you water. What's the special thing about water it's polar, not polar. Yeah. That's okay. Go ahead, and I'll have this recorded and send it to you. So water looks like this, right? And we said it was polar, and this is partially negative. This is partially positive, and then we have over here. We probably have another water, and this is partially negative and partially positive, and does that make sense? And so there's going to be, what do we call it, the attraction between these two? It's not a bond. It's not really a bond. It's a bond that's not a bond. It's the answer to a lot of questions in biology. I keep saying it's an answer to a lot. It's hydrogen bonding.
Oh, I
I
got
got that
right.
right. Because a hydrogen bond is a weak bond.
It's a weak bond between molecules.
Yeah, between
It's not a chemical bond, right? So covalent bond is this bond here. This is covalent between two atoms, and they're sharing electrons. Ionic bonds happen between things like sodium and chloride and chlorine. They take and give electrons, and they kind of hang out with each other. That's an ionic bond. Hydrogen bonds are kind of attractions between polar molecules. Okay? That's the reason water has all its special properties.
Now
This one was some people had confusion. That's because people didn't understand solute, solvent, solution, right? So the way it goes is that if you have a water and you're putting salt in the water, which dissolves? Salt dissolves. This is the example I gave you in class. Salt dissolves, right? And because water dissolves salt, we said that salt is the solute,
And the solvent is the water.
and the solvent is the water.
The solution is both of them put together.
That's right. And it's not a mixture. So now, do the same thing with oxygen.
So the oxygen is the solute.
The oxygen's a solute.
Okay.
Now that's it. There it is. So the oxygen is a solute. The oxygen is a solute because it's dissolved in the water. The oxygen's in the water, you see. So that's why the answer is solute. See, it goes back to that example and being able to apply it. You have to be able to apply these answers to the problem. So solvents is what's dissolving. Solutes what's being dissolved. The solution is the whole thing. And a solution is a type of mixture, right? All right. So now, yeah. All right. You have a good weekend. Make sure you try to look at this when you get it at home. All right. So now let's move on. I've only got a few more to go. If you have an atom, and I like to draw these out. People don't draw them out. I didn't see anybody really draw these out on the test. It really was kind of like, what a wasted opportunity. I know carbon can make 4 bonds. I know that. I know hydrogen can only make 1. How many hydrogens can I bond to carbon? And so each one of these is only going to make 1 bond. This one can make 4 bonds. How would I put them together? No.
So how many hydrogen go to carbon?
But you divide them.
Nope.
So you need 4 hydrogen to go to carbon?
That's right. You got it.
And
So
I just
if
thought that it makes 4 bonds.
it makes 4 bonds, that's right. You know carbon can only make 4 bonds. You know a hydrogen can make 1. So if you're going to put them together, the only possible way to do it, if you're not going to you can't make double bonds with hydrogen, right? You can't make triple bonds with hydrogen. It needs to make 4. So the answer is 4 hydrogens.
Because when you double and triple, that goes back to...
No, it's not.
You could do this. Carbon can make double bond to carbon,
Right.
and then you can make hydrogen. You can make that. That's okay. You could do that. But that's not what this says. This hydrogen can make only 1. And if carbon and hydrogen were mixed at just the right ratio, you would form methane. If carbon only bonded with hydrogen, so carbon doesn't bond with carbon, no carbon's bonding with carbon, just carbon with hydrogen, this is what you'd make, 4 bonds. So that's why that's the answer. The answer is 4. That was the trickiest question on the test.
I got
No, it was not.
it wasn't.
I thought it was.
If you knew, when we got to this back part, it's like I knew all of it, but I got mixed up with polypeptide. Polypeptide and peptide bond is the same thing.
What did you think was tricky?
It's tricky, and then it's the covalent.
Figure 1 above looks like this. In fact, why don't I copy it?
I said DNA.
Hold on a second.
No, it was the group. This one right here. This one.
All right, well, let's go do it. Let's do it. So figure 1 above represents which of the following? So let's look at figure 1 above. Right, yeah, I'll tell you the answers.
2, right?
Yeah, 2. 2 is the answer.
I said 1.
Let's look at, that's right. But let's take a look at what these are. So we got this thing called figure 1, and it says represents which of the following? Is it a protein? No. Is it nucleic acid? Yes, absolutely. Is it DNA? For sure. So it's 2 of them. Is it a lipid? No. So DNA is a nucleic acid. So it's nucleic acid and DNA. So the next one asks you, in column A, in figure 1, represents the part of the molecule that holds the monomers together. So here's column A. I'm trying to figure out what the question means. Here's figure A. There's column 1, right? What does this represent? The stuff that holds the monomers together. What are the monomers of DNA called? Nucleotides, right? And what holds the nucleotides together? Which of these 4? Peptide bonds holds what together?
Oh, no, amino acids.
Amino acids. So it's not peptide bonds.
I knew it.
Ionic bonds, there's no ions in here.
No.
Ionic bonds don't hold any molecule together.
Sugar.
And glycoside does, I mean, that has nothing to do with this, right? So that's right. It's sugar phosphate bonds are the, and the answer was right in front of you. Look, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar, phosphate, sugar. All right, so it was right there. Yeah, it just took a little, I tried to make it so I would try to remind you what it was. That's why I left the S in there and the P. And I remember, if you go back in that 2-hour video, look at the last like 5-10 minutes, I repeat that like 4 or 5 times. I tell you, it's gonna be on it.
I wrote it down.
I will. You can have it if you know your period. No, wait. I have to put it. Your second block.
Oh, yeah.
You can have it. It's here. Yeah.
I wrote that.
Come over and get it. All right. So
I wrote that on the back of my flashcard.
good. So I hope you got it right.
I didn't. I was told you I got mixed up with the peptide bond.
Oh, you thought peptide bond because that's when it keeps popping in your brain.
Yeah.
We'll look at peptide bond in just a minute. In figure 1, there's an attractive force between the strands. This is one strand, and this is one strand, and this is another strand, right? And it's labeled D. There it is, labeled D. Do you see it? Some people didn't even see where the D was. What is the force called that holds them together? Anybody know?
Well, I know it's not C.
You know it's not C. Okay. Actually, it turns out it is C.
Hydrogen bond.
Yep.
So that's the weak.
That's the weak bonds that are holding the two strands together.
I put
Glycoside is we didn't talk about glycoside at all, so that's not even, I made it up, so it's not even a word as far as I know. Ionic and covalent, there's the covalent bonds again are right here. They're in between the atoms. They're not in between the molecules. And ionic, there's no ionic bonds here. So remember, ionic is when you have a positive or a negative. So the answer is not covalent or ionic. The answer is hydrogen bonds. It's one of those things I kept saying throughout the whole unit. Whenever you're in doubt, pick hydrogen bonds because they're so involved in everything.
Yeah, right. Oh, great.
Yeah, it's something. It's, you know what, it happens to everybody. So the next one is in figure 2. Now let's go ahead and take a look at figure 2 here. I'll put it down here. Figure 2 is here. It says figure 2 shows a molecule that's made up of CH and O, right? You see C, there's H, there's O. It also has nitrogen, which I don't know why I didn't put nitrogen, it was my mistake, but CHON and sometimes sulfur. That was a clue. I was trying to make a clue for you that it's not, well, almost opposite. That's amino acids, that's protein. Nitrogen, sulfur, carbon, oxygen, hydrogen, you're probably talking about a protein. So here you have peptide in at least a living system. So here's what's the bond that holds the units together? This is one unit, another two, A, B, C, D are units. What's holding the A, B, C, D together? What's this called? Peptide bonds. So the answer is peptide bonds. Every one of these I promised you was going to be on a test. I said, please remember, this is going to be on a test.
And I studied it.
And you did. I know, and you messed up, and that's okay. You'll do better on the actual test, right? So sugar phosphate, no, that's for DNA. Ionic is not, and glycoside is not a thing, right? So, all right. So let's go ahead and take a look at the next one. Figure 4 shows a molecule that is mostly made of. Let's look at figure 4 first of all. 4 is over here. Wait, it should be 3, right? That was my mistake. I remember I told you to fix that. This should say figure 3, and this should say 3. That was a one error. I only made one, but I wanted to make a perfect test. It just didn't happen. So here we have these things all bonded together in a chain. So that's a polymer, right? Each one of these things is a what? What does that look like? Remember, it is a monomer. Very good. Excellent. But it's also, I drew it on the board. I drew it like this on the board.
Oh,
It's a hexagon. There are a bunch of hexagons together. A sugar. It could be glucose. It could be galactose. It's not fructose because it's 6-sided, right? So it's a carbohydrate. That's it. That's just that simple, right?
I said carbohydrate.
Yeah. I wasn't asking if it was, I didn't ask if it was, if this polymer was cellulose but I did put something here that I was hoping you'd pick carbohydrates. All right, so the next thing is, oops, I circled it. Let me go ahead and do that again. The next one asks you for, figure 4, and it's asking you what it is. Well, figure 4 is a long chain of mostly what? Carbon and hydrogen. A long chain of mostly carbon and hydrogen. What do we call those? Any long chain of mostly carbon and hydrogen. And then I said one of them, I pointed out one of them is double bonded, and so one's saturated, the other's unsaturated.
Lipid.
It's a lipid. You're right, you got it right. It's a lipid.
But I say carbohydrate.
So the answer is lipid. So the answer here is lipid. And it's not a carbohydrate because there's not, remember with carbohydrates there's always, look at a carbohydrate, look at it. There's carbon, a lot of oxygen, you see that? CHO, it's just CHO. With lipids it's mostly just CH. There's some O's in there but mostly CH. All right, so it's not a protein because there's no nitrogen. It's not a nucleic acid because there's no phosphorus and there's not in a ring and all that. And it's not a carbohydrate because there's not a lot of oxygens. So, and remember, carbohydrates are CHO, which it's 1 to 2 to 1, right? The ratios. All right. So that's it. That's all there is. That was all the test was about. Try to get ready for the next one. The next test, the actual test, will be a lot like this. It's going to have questions a lot like this. See how you applied the questions. You see how you had to figure things out. So this definition.
Like, you have to know the definition, how we had to know the definition of theory and stuff like that.
Theory you should know. I'm going to ask another question on the next test about theory, yes. So just know what a theory is. It won't be that same question, but it'll be another one about, I might ask you to apply it. I might give you a hypothesis and a theory and say which one of these is a theory. Right?
For 20,
I had to study for this test.
For 20, I knew it was A because I just saw double bonding. I'm like, oh, it had to be a lipid. Because I remember you kept on repeating in class, it had a double bonding.
Yeah. I said, remember, that's right. That was the one that was unsaturated, right? So there's the saturated, unsaturated lipids, right, or fatty acids. So we're good. Any other questions? It's a good time to ask a question so I can put in the video.
I believe you covered it all.
All right, excellent. So hopefully on a test, remember you're going to do a test. Hopefully you go really good job on the test. And then when you retake it, that can take over for any bad grade you did on the first one, on the practice. Does that make sense? Retakes are after school, and your actual test will be on Wednesday. That gives me time to write it. Okay?
Okay.
All right, have a good one.
You too.